So I want to say this because I know I give libertarians a lot of crap. I get that. And people will often say, well, then why are you talking to them all the time? Why are you and Tom Woods friendly? Like, I don't get it. And it's like, well, because actually I think libertarians are so close, and that's why I'm so hard on them, because they're close to the answer. But this is the beauty. Okay, so I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but for the audience that, members who may not have been familiar, like, this was the whole point of neo-reaction. Like, this was the beautiful synthesis, right? This is why everybody in neo-reaction was a post-libertarian, because the whole point was, we know this isn't going to work by itself. So Hoppe's right about like a lot. However, like, you need authoritarianism on the outside and libertarianism on the inside. You need the hard shell so you can have the soft, chocolatey center. So, we want a high degree of order and a high degree of power in the ability to maintain the state and keep people who shouldn't be here out. But once it comes to the internal workings, we want a fairly open society, right? Like that's the model. That was the whole NRX model. Libertarianism in one state, if you will. And so that was kind of the whole idea. And this should be like the solution to this problem. This is always what I'm trying to get libertarians over the line on. They're like, oh, you're an authoritarian. I'm like, well, only in one way, like in exactly one way. But it's the way that allows me to not be an authoritarian everywhere else. And if you don't do this one thing, you don't maintain order in this one thing, then you don't get to have the freedom in any other aspect. And that's why I'm hard on libertarians. That's why I'm beating them. It's not because I hate them. It's because they're so close to the answer and I need them to get over the line.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a classic sort of Freud called it the narcissism of small differences. Rene Girard has this quote about, the people that we always want to condemn the most are our neighbors, and it's because we are close. We have a lot of overlap, and it's like we're that much more frustrated, by the small differences. So I do think it makes sense that drives a lot of it.
Spoon, I
have to ask. Can I steal man the authoritarianism?
I'm sorry.
For a moment. So can I steal man the authoritarianism for a moment?
Yes, by all means. I was actually going to pivot to you on this, so go for it.
Yeah, because I've spoken to Europeans and Americans about this, and okay, how can I say this in a nice way that doesn't come off as too mean? I feel like I'm talking to two different species of people when it comes to this kind of stuff, because I feel like to Europeans, authoritarianism is action. To Americans, authoritarianism is structured, in the sense that to us, or rather to the Americans, is that if you basically do, because I asked a friend of mine about this. I said to him, because he's an American, I said, tell me if you agree with this. To an American, authoritarianism is the state does something I don't like expediently. And he said, yes. So it's not a focus on, is the state doing something that it can or shouldn't do? It's more just, it's doing it in a way that I don't like. Even if it is a competent statecraft-orientated action, it seems to be more very heavily focused on the state should not be able to do this and therefore it's bad. And so when I sort of look at basically anything that the state does in the American sense, I've noticed a lot of the protest on it is very much driven by it's violating a sense of structure, and there's very little conversation, if any at all, about what should people in government actually do with power, especially when it's limited by the Constitution, when sort of a lot of people are going, if it's hampering us in a way from actually executing what a functioning state should look like, it's becoming a burden in a way that Americans find very difficult to move away from, because that's basically all they know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And this is why, so one of my issues is trying to shift. Americans have been told that small government is a goal. And I think that small government is generally good because it allows for the cultivation of virtue. But I don't think that the smallness of the government itself is the actual goal. And I think that's what gets Americans so confused. Rather than
it's competence.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
And rather than asking, is what's happening here good for the people or not? The question is just, is there less government? And sometimes the answer is less government is the good thing. And in fact, it's probably the answer more often than not. But I think making that your only gauge is the problem. I am Aristotelian in the sense of I think we have a telos as a people. I think we should be orienting ourselves towards an end and a shared outcome. And what does that? What gets us there is the good. That is the positive thing. Now, for Americans, I think our telos is one that is largely one of liberty and small government. I think that does actually get us where we want to go. But the point is where we want to go. And if the government being smaller in an area helps us, then we should do it. But if the government, doing something critical will help us along that line, that's okay. That is not in and of itself an evil. I don't want to abolish the state. And I don't think that ultimately that is the answer. I do want a smaller state when it achieves the type of goal we're looking for. But I think you're right, Spoon, that just having that singular goal of small government as the only end of our understanding of like how we should govern or how we should be ruled, I do think that does run us into a problem with a lot of American conservatism and libertarianism. But I don't know, Jeremy, do you entirely disagree with that? Have we?
No. I mean, I would say I broadly disagree with that. I mean, I'm often having these debates as well about these. One term for them is sort of these naptists, these like nap absolutists, where they're like, well, all I have to do is never violate the nap, and I don't have to consider the consequences. And I don't really get this thinking. You have to consider the consequences at some point. Like if literally just following the nap resulted in the destruction of everything, your family, your way of life, then like I would just violate the nap. It just doesn't even seem like a hard choice. To defend these people a little bit, like there are consequential reasons that we want a nap-like or deontological rule-based government, which is that it's predictable, which is that we can predict how the government will act and how others will act towards us. I would posit that this is still a consequence. So it's still ultimately something that we value because of the results to some degree. But, like there's these classic trolley arguments, like, would you pull the trolley lever to save, 5 for 1? And then they do this other one of like, would you push a fat man off of a bridge, to save 5 lives, right? Like, and a lot of people will say, well, I would pull the trolley lever to save 5 instead of 1, but I wouldn't push the fat man off the bridge to save 5 lives. These are the most common answers that people give. And some ethicists and philosophers like to say that these answers are contradictory, but I actually don't think that they are. They're speaking to the type of society that we want to live in. If there's some contrived scenario where I have to pull a lever, yeah, pull the lever. What is this? This isn't like a real thing that happens in the real world. But in the real world, I don't want to worry that I go into my doctor and he chooses to harvest my organs because it would save 5 lives instead of 1, and it would be more, efficient or whatever, And so I think to defend sort of the nap-ish positions in a consequential way, it's about having a government or having a state whose behavior is predictable, that won't arbitrarily violate rights because it produces good consequences.
Hey guys, if you've been watching this show for a while, then you know that around here we encourage something that conservatives usually don't do. Winning. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to keep it going, then head over to Blaze TV. They have the behind-the-scenes content, exclusives, and documentaries that you're just not going to see anywhere else. So go to blazetv.com/Oren and subscribe today. The promo code is AURON, and you'll save $20 right now off the annual plan.